Nothing moves in Wonsan without our knowledge. It is a city of death, one high-ranking U.S. naval officer said. The biggest day's score for the UN surface force was chalked up March 15th at 11 a.m. Then the light cruiser Manchester, destroyers English and Everston, and the patrol frigates Burlington, Glendale, and Sausalito opened up simultaneously on a troop billeting area. 5 minutes later, the gunfire ceased and the aerial photo reconnaissance planes scouted the area. The photographs revealed 6,000 enemy casualties. At 1 p.m., the destroyer Wallace L. Lind opened fire on another barracks. 2 minutes later, all that remained were ruins and 2,000 dead or wounded soldiers. This is an excerpt from a newspaper clipping sent to Ken by his wife Betty on March 15th, entitled Nothing Moves. It is incredible that Mr. Fiddler's ship, the Lind, was able to kill 2,000 soldiers in just a few short minutes. I'm Marley, the co-host of this podcast, sitting here with Mr. Kenneth H. Fiddler, and thank you for joining us on our 17th episode. Mr. Fiddler, what happened when the Lind was about to make one of its many return trips to Sasebo on March 17th?
As we were leaving Wonsan Harbor, the enemy shore batteries fired at us and just about every other ship in the harbor. All the ships fired back as fast as they could until we had knocked out all of the shore batteries.
Was any of the ships hit during this fire?
Only one of our ships got hit, not the Lind, but most of us had some close ones. After all this happened, they decided to keep us in Wonsan for a little while longer. On Friday afternoon, we fired our 8,000th 5-inch shell, and by that evening, we were close to our 9,000th 5-inch shell fire. We fired our guns so much that the gun barrels got very hot and burned all the paint off of the barrels. That's a lot of firing. I'm glad that I wasn't on the other end of those barrels.
I can't blame you after, what a few minutes can do to thousands of men. When you arrived in Sasebo, you received several letters from your loved ones, but you also got 2 messages that were exchanged between the cruiser Manchester and the Lind. What did those messages say?
From USS W.L. Lind to USS Manchester. Captain, good morning. Every time they fire at us, we stir them up so they shoot back. Signed, Carson. From USS Manchester to USS W.L. Lind. Let the sleeping dogs and cummies sleep so I can get some too. Top of the morning to you. Your operations and accomplishments in past months have been outstanding. Pleasant period of relaxation to good ship Lind. Signed, Rear Admiral Alan E. Smith.
Well, those are some very kind congratulations to your excellent accomplishments. So the ship stayed in Sasebo for a week while you guys did repairs and gathered supplies. They had a little recreation before you went back to Wonsan. What happened when you arrived back in Wonsan?
On Monday, March 26th, we got on the way at 0630 for Busan. A plane came out to meet us and we fired at a sleeve about 12:30. We arrived in Busan at 17:30 and at 2200 we were on our way to Wonsan. On March 27th, we arrived in Wonsan in the morning and refueling at 12:30. We got on our way again 1800 for Songjin and arrived there about 2400. We spent the last 4 days around Songjin and Chongjin, firing on bridges and railroad yards and a lot of road junctions. when we were firing our guns, we were running out of some place to meet a replenishing group to refuel and take on more ammunition.
What happened on April 5th?
On D-Day, April 7th, we started bombarding at 0600. At 0800, the Royal Marines went ashore on a commando raid. We searched all evening for a downed pilot, but never found him. Then we left for Sasebo for emergency repairs.
So after this, your ships still spent a lot of time there, but you did a lot of shore bombarding, meeting replenishing ships to refuel, took on more ammunition, and just continued to fire and fight. But you did get some good news. On May 9th, your division was relieved by Division 131, and that meant you were going to be heading home.
On May 9th, our Division 161 was relieved by Division 131 at 1300, and we proceeded to Yokosuka. We arrived there at 0900 on May 11th and spent the day offloading ammunition, and then got underway at 2400. We were heading for home, and our first stop was Midway. We arrived there at 0700 and had a brief party before we headed back to sea at 10:30.
When did you arrive in Pearl Harbor?
We arrived at Pearl Harbor at 0930 on May 19th, Armed Forces Day. We were beginning to get a little excited. It was hard to believe, but it was gradually sinking in that we would be home soon. We got underway at 0620 on May 21st, San Diego, California. Here we come. Even though we were well on our way home, the bombarding of Wonsan continued. This clipping was taken from newspaper back from the USS battleship New Jersey, carried the unprecedented naval day to day. The Far East Fleet flagship joined the siege of Wonsan destroyers, patrolled frigates and minesweepers from 6 different countries that have taken part of the non-stop bombardment. The New Jersey's 1-ton shells were the first of that size to hit Wonsan since its sister ship, the USS Missouri, bombarded the port city March 1st.
What was it like when you guys finally arrived in San Diego?
We arrived in San Diego and tied up at the Broadway Pier, since it was rather special arriving in San Diego. Everyone decided on the way from Pearl Harbor that we would have an anchor pull. There were 60 envelopes. Each had a number in it from 1 to 60. Each envelope was sold for $10, which made the total $600. The idea was that when we arrived in San Diego and anchored or tied up at the dock or tied up alongside another ship, whichever it would be, the official time was written in the ship's log. Once we knew the official time, we then knew what minute was a winner. The 60 numbers in the envelope stood for the minutes of the hour. Ducky Moan and I each invested the $10 in an envelope. And would you believe it? Moan won. That was a nice coming home present for him.
Ooh, $600.
$600.
Man!
Yeah. We were soon allowed off the ship. Many of the fellows had wives and families waiting on the dock for them. By 1100, I made it to the telephone and called Betty. It was nice talking to her and knowing that I was back in the United States and that much closer to home. We were so happy because it wouldn't be long until our baby was born.
Wow.
Yeah, we got underway at 0630 on May 28th and headed for the Panama Canal. We did a lot of chipping paint and painting. It was business as usual. I guess they wanted us to look good when we returned home. We didn't paint much outside because we were approaching a hurricane and it was getting rough and wet.
So, as you said, you guys were expected to do some painting, and I understand that you have a pretty interesting story about that. Would you share that with our listeners?
They announced that we would have liberty late afternoon, but that we would be painting most of the day. They put the deck force over the side to paint the sides of the ship. Since I was in the O Division, we were responsible for painting the bridge and the mast. Guess who got the job painting the top part of the mast? I got the job painting the cross member on the mast, 90 feet in the air. I climbed up with a bucket of paint and shinnied out to the end of the cross member and painting my way back. While I was up there, the deck force was over the side painting. The gun crews were cleaning their guns right beneath me, and the engineers were refueling the ship. Also, the signalmen were putting their freshly laundered flags back in their flag bag, which were situated right under where I was painting. When I ran out of paint and I had to lower my paint can on a line to have it refilled. As I was pulling the filled paint can up the line, the can slipped out of the sling, tumbling down and sprayed paint all over the freshly cleaned guns, ended up in the flag bag, freshly laundered flags. Well, you can imagine I wasn't too popular at that particular moment. In fact, if I wasn't up so high, I think some of them might have come up after me. It didn't take me very long to decide that I'd better stay up on the mast for a while.
Oh my goodness. What happened next?
Fortunately for me, something else happened at the same time that I dropped the paint. As I said before, the engineers were refueling the ship, and the deck force was over the side painting the sides of the ship right down to the waterline. To refuel the ship, they had to bring a 4-inch hose from the dock over to the ship and insert it into the trunk where they put the fuel hose. Then they pumped oil into the fuel tanks under various crew compartments and also under some of the main deck. The engineers opened various vent caps so that they could see down into the fuel tanks and tell when the tanks were next full. They were supposed to have someone stationed at each of the open vents, and evidently that didn't happen that day. Just as I dropped the can of paint, oil started spilling out of one of the vents onto the main deck, and no one noticed the oil running all over the deck and down the freshly painted side. Most of the deck force had just completed painting the side of the ship and were putting away their slings, and they had over the side to stand on while they were painting. They also were about ready to take a shower so that they could go ashore on a well-deserved liberty. Then all hell broke loose. The oil kept coming until someone noticed it was running all over the deck. Eventually, someone yelled to shut off the oil, but by then the fresh paint job was covered in oil. When all this excitement happened, everything who had been glaring up at me turned out their attention to the oil slick. It didn't take me long to figure out was my best chance, and I was down the mast and out of there before anyone knew what happened.
Slipping out the back door, waiting. Oh my gosh. What happened next?
Well, pretty soon we heard an announcement over the PA system that there would be no liberty until the oil was cleaned up and the side was repainted. Well, that almost caused a mutiny. Most of the fellows that had started to clean it up and ready for liberty continued to do so. It took a while, but eventually they made an announcement. The Liberty Party could leave the ship immediately unless they were in the engineering department. The whole engineering department had to stay aboard ship, clean up the mess, and repaint the side of the ship. I happened to be scheduled for liberty, and you can believe it that anyone who had liberty got off that ship as fast as he could. We never knew when they might change their mind and make everyone clean up the mess. It's funny because after all of that, everyone seemed to forget about the fellow that was painting the mast. On the morning of June 5th, the ship looked spick and span, and at 0800 we started through the Panama Canal. It took us until 1630 to get through, and by 1900 we were on the way and on our way to Norfolk. I had been anxious to know if I was a father yet. At 2000, my wondering was over. I received a radiogram from the Radio Shack telling me that Mary Beth Fiddler was born at 07:53 that morning. I was so relieved to know that everything was all right and that we had a little girl. I didn't find out until that the Navy wouldn't allow them to send me a personal message announcing the baby, but that Reverend Sharp contacted a friend in the Navy Department and he took care of it. So what they did was send a message to all ships in the Atlantic Fleet that Mary Beth, the daughter of Kenneth H. Fiddler of the Wonsan Lynn, was born. Our ship copied the message and gave it to me.
That's pretty special. They announced it to all the fleets.
Yeah.
So everybody knew you were a daddy. How special. And I'm sure you were eager to get home. And you arrived finally on June 9th, just 2 days after she was born.
Yeah, on June 9th we arrived home at last. We pulled in Norfolk at 1000 and tied up at the convoy escort pier. The crew had already been told which half of the crew would be getting leave first, and of course I had made sure that I was in that group. All of us in the first leave party and those who had liberty the first night, we were ready to leave the ship as soon as they passed the word.
How did you guys plan on getting home?
A few minutes later, the announcement came we were out of there. Ducky Mom and I decided the quickest way home was to get out on the main road and hitchhike.
Oh, wow.
So that we did, and we were very fortunate to get a ride almost right away. Two of the sailors picked us up. They were on their way to New York State. They went right through Chester where Betty was.
And I'm sure your first stop was to the hospital to see your wife and baby.
I was in the Chester Hospital to see Betty and not seeing her for almost 9 months. Also, I got my first look at the best of the family, our daughter, Mary Beth. She looked great, and it felt so good to be home together as a family.
Wow. What a perfect ending to your unexpected tour in Korea. Truly the best welcome home present you could ask for. Next week, we'll pick up and learn what it was like for Ken to become a family man with his new baby and home with his wife. This is Marley and the Ping Jockey signing off.
Bye-bye.